Oh, we always start out laughing. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Mr. Teacher, Mr. Preacher YouTube channel podcast. I am Kevin. I am the teacher. That is Jake. He is the preacher. And we are here to learn what lasts in athletics and teach and preach it back to you. We are in our self-control series. This is what? The sixth, Jake? Sixth pillar in John Wooden's Pyramid of Success. And this is number 3 of 5. We've already covered number 1. Discipline is Destiny by Ryan Holiday. Number 2, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. See, we are very well censored. That was number 2. And today we are on number 3, A Complaint-Free World, or How to Stop Complaining and Start Enjoying the Life You've Always Wanted by Will Bowen. Concept and so hard to execute, which sounds like a lot of things in life. So we're going to talk today about how to get rid of complaining, how to identify it, using the structures and the systems and the tools from Bowen's book. Jake, it is great to see you.
Good to see you, Mr. Kevin. How are you?
I'm great. This is going to be so fun. This is one of those books where you have to look in the mirror. Some of them are pretty straightforward. This is one that's like, ugh, gut punch after gut punch. And maybe that's just a symptom of my current last, 3 to 4 weeks. But I think a few people are going to resonate with this one. So I ask you, before we get into just a summary of the book and some basic definitions, kick us off. Bless us, bless our audience, bless the episode. It's going to be a good one, as always.
Holy Father, thank you so much for another wonderful day and the breath in our lungs. And I pray that that breath would be edifying to our audience as we go through Will Bowen's book and talk about self-control. I pray that this would just be a blessing, that our time would be useful and edifying, not only to us, but to those that listen to us. Father, just thank you for the opportunity to be friends with Kevin, to talk with Kevin. And I just pray that you would join us in our time. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. I want to acknowledge up front that this is a difficult battle to control our tongues. What is that? It was the book of James, Jay, correct me. Something about the tongue being a rudderless ship, hard to control. You know, it can steer our entire body wrongward. That was a terrible summary of that. But I mean, it's difficult. Like, this is difficult.
You nailed the paraphrase. It was maybe a liberal paraphrase, but you nailed it. You got the metaphor on, and that's what matters.
All right. So what is this book? So Complaint-Free World, Will Bowen. So a Complaint-Free World is actually an organization. They're trying to give away, as of this writing, 60 million purple bracelets. The idea being that people take a 21-day no complaint challenge. At the end, you get a certificate of happiness, not a certificate of no complaining. There's a idea behind that. And if you ever complain, we'll go into more details, you just switch your wristband. I got a rubber band to the other hand. And then you're like, oh, crud, I complain. I go to the other side. And we'll talk about when you do switch hands. But that's the 21-day challenge. That's something that they stick to. The conventional knowledge of 21 days being the habit. But to read it, they have used the simple idea, people have done this, of putting a purple silicone bracelet on their wrist and then switching it from wrist to wrist every time they complain until they complete 21 consecutive days without complaining, criticizing, or gossiping. They have formed a new habit of becoming conscious of and changing their words. They have changed their thoughts and begun to change their lives by design. This has been a global phenomenon, according to the book, for 2 reasons. Number 1, kind of obvious. There's too much complaining in the world, a lot of negativity. And number 2, the world is not the way we would like it to be. So we live in a very broken, fallen world, and we like to voice our opinions about other people or things in the form of complaints. That is why this resonates with so much. So in this book, like, what is the promise? So if you go read the book after you listen to this, what do you get? In this book, you'll learn why people complain. We will cover that. That's pretty interesting. How complaining is destructive to our lives. The benefits, yes, benefits, people derive from complaining. The 5 reasons people complain, and even how to get others to stop complaining. So all those are the promise of Will Bowen's book. It is structured in a pretty unique way. So there's a famous tool about competency and the 4 stages people go through when they learn something new. So part 1 is unconscious incompetence, like you don't even know you complain. It's not even on your radar. Number 2 is conscious incompetence, like you're aware you complain, but it's like the carrot at the end of the stick or Charlie Brown's football, you never can quite hit. Like, I hate that stage, by the way. It's terrible. Part 3 is conscious competence, like you're aware and you're getting good at it. And then part 4 is unconscious competence, meaning you just do it naturally without thinking. So really nice structure to the book, especially when it comes to the idea of complaining. The motto, I just want to cover the motto of the no complaint world or complaint-free world is from Dr. Maya Angelou, is if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. Don't complain. How do we go about this in terms of not complaining? Very, very simple. Okay. The no complaint experiment. Let's go back to that. So how do you do it? I'm jumping around a little bit, and that's okay. How do you do it? You just get a bracelet. They do have bracelets you purchase, supports the nonprofit. You are now on day 1 of your journey of 21 days. When, not if, you catch yourself complaining out loud. That is one of the biggest things. It's not if you think something, it's if you say it out loud. Criticizing, gossiping, sarcastic. You move the bracelet to the other wrist, and you are back to day 1. So it's every time you go forward, you stop, you go back to day 1. Stay with it. It usually takes 4 to 8 months to reach 21 consecutive days. So set your expectations accordingly. Most people, it's around that 6-month mark. Later in the book, it mentions 6 months to 21 days. That's some brutal math. If you were honest with yourself, you will discover that it takes you days, weeks, even months to get to even day 2. That one, yeah, that one made me laugh as well. Just some other things is like, this is a skill. So learning not to complain is a skill, and it takes patience, obviously, to get to this 21 days. It is not a race. It is not a magic pill. So you got to set those realistic expectations. I do want to talk about the definitions of complaining, and then this will set the ground so we can talk about everything else in the book. Merriam-Webster, let's just start with Webster. I like when an author goes there. Defines complain as to express grief, pain, or discontent. Another definition is a few pages down the road. And 1 second. It talks about the Chinese definition and the symbols that go into the word complain. This is super interesting, Jake. The 2 symbols include hug and ego. So the Chinese believe that to complain is to hug your ego. That is interesting to unpack in and of itself. And then the other one I want to talk about is like the difference between complaining and facts versus processing. I think that is useful because you got to set your ground rules if you're going to play the game and not complain. So a fact versus a complaint. So a complaints are counterattacks for perceived injustices. Complainers say why. No, not complainers say why not. A statement of fact is a neutral comment intended to inform, not berate the listener. So as we will hear later, it's not necessarily what you say, it's how you say it and the tone behind it. Like if we were able to register the tone, that can be the differentiator between a complaint and a statement of fact. The other one that's mentioned way later in the book, and I wish it would have been at the beginning, though I understand why it was back here, was the difference between complaining and processing. Processing and complaining are not the same thing. Processing is sharing your feelings about something that has happened, not just rehashing the experience. So here are these 2 phrases. Processing says the emotion out loud. Use feeling words. I feel afraid when you do that. That means that's a process. It owns the experience is yours and it's processing. Versus, this is a complaint. I feel like you're a jerk when you do that. See, this is very different. So that's something that's pretty crazy to see. The last thing is just the pervasiveness of complaining. So in the book, and I don't know if these numbers have been updated necessarily, but the average person complains, Jake, between 15 to 30 times a day. I thought that was actually reasonable. I thought it would
Yeah.
be more.
Yeah.
And that equals 4.5 billion complaints spoken every day in the United States. And Will Bowen harkens back to our very fun conversation on the evolution of cooperation, meaning how do you invade a system, and how little. And I think you remember that too. It was jaw dropping to me how little of momentum you need in order to change a system. You get one person to do it, and then you get one other, and then it spreads and spreads and spreads. Same thing I think Bowen was describing with complaining. So that is the groundwork for the book. Again, we're looking at just the self-control, not the other stuff in here about habits, but practicing self-discipline, keeping your emotions under control, good judgment, and common sense are essential. And that's what Wooden was after. So anything from just the general soliloquy monologue on complaining that stood out to you, or that you like, or someone even you're personally curious about with complaining?
Words have power. Words also have meanings. This is the other thing that occurred to me as you were talking. A lot of our episodes, or whatever we want to call these things, start with a definition or definitions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important that we understand words have definitions, because all too often words get hijacked. Can I say hijacked? I'd say hijacked.
Yeah.
And we lose the actual meaning of what we're saying, which then leads to a lot of consternation and friction between people, because you don't know that's not what that means. Why are you using it that way? It's good to remember that words have definitions, and words are powerful, right? When you understand their definitions, you understand the power that you're putting out there when you speak. That was a big thing. Just holy.
I should, yeah, it's like people perish for lack of knowledge. Like I actually, when I read a lot of these books and everybody defines the Latin meaning of something, and like Holiday did or Bowen does a couple times, I actually miss, and granted, I never cared for this at all, when people actually understood the meaning behind words, like how words are broken down and how they're shaped together. It seemed like other cultures, other language were much better than English, and we're just kind of willy-nilly these days. I almost want to just carry around a dictionary. Like, this is one thing I was thinking about on a walk the other day. Just a dictionary, so when somebody says something, I'd be able to define that and just call it out, call it up, whatever you want to say. I agree with you. So yes, words do have power.
I would like to do that in the church. Just for the record. That doesn't mean what you think it means. Or do you have any idea what you just said?
Is it the Strong's? What is that book that has all the...
Sure, you have the Strong's Concordance, yeah.
Yeah.
Or just the Bible itself. Like, if you just go to a different passage, it's pretty good at defining what is being said there. And then if you just take what it said there, like, it'll say, this is this. And I'm like, okay. And then you go use it in the rest of the Bible. Like, oh, interesting.
Jake is the Popeye of the Strong's Concordance. He's going to have a double-fisted... He's going to have a handle, and then the Strong's Concordance glued to it. He's just going to whack people with it. He's just going to have these massive forearms from beating people at the Strong's Concordance. He's not small. Like, I mean, really, if you've never seen one, it's massive. All right.
It is a big book.
Mm-hmm. So, Jake, we have a number of topics. Now, we're not going to go in particular order of the parts of the book. We're going to jump around as we see fit and whatever makes sense for today's conversation. So, Jake, pick out what you would like to start with. We have some really funny things, some turns of phrases, tools, concepts from the book. Jake, where would you like to start?
Okay. Unconscious incompetence. Shakespearean poker. The cards and roles we play.
Oh, Shakespearean poker. So the reason why it's called that, just a fun little turn of phrase, is Shakespeare said that we play many roles in life as we go through. It's a very famous quote. And what do we get from complaining is the idea behind Shakespearean poker. And so Will Bowen was actually a very chubby guy and, growing up, and he lost 100 pounds, but he learned that he could play a certain card for his size. He's the fat guy. He actually was called, the fat guy or fat boy, and he didn't even mind it until he took it a little negatively when he refused to, go ask a girl to dance, and he used that as a scapegoat. So he learned that complaining could get him high in the terms we're going to see. It took him 5.5 years to shed this excuse. So we want to talk about complaining. I mean, the cards we play, we play them far longer than your usefulness. So what does complaining get us, according to Robin Kowalski in one of his studies? Many complaints involve attempts to elicit particular interpersonal reactions from others. And I don't think people do this manipulatively. I think some do, but I don't think everybody does. I think a lot of people do it unconsciously. They get two things: sympathy or approval. For example, people may complain about their health, not because they actually feel sick, but the sick role, there's the role, allows them to achieve secondary gains such as sympathy from others or the avoidance of adverse events. Meaning, yeah, I know I'm unhealthy. They can't, it's kind of like that Mark Manson subtle art, right? They don't have Disappointment Panda in their life. They need Disappointment Panda. I love that stinking mascot. So by complaining and playing the fat card, I had gotten sympathy and approval, and I expressed a justifiable reaction for not talking to girls. Moving onward, he says, as soon as you begin acting like the person you wish to become, you are that person. You are not faking it. You are being it. Ask yourself, this was hard to even read, have I ever played the sick role? Now I'm putting that in brackets, whatever role it is that you've played. Am I doing it now? Meaning, am I making myself the victim? So Shakespearean poker is, am I complaining for sympathy or approval? And which card am I playing? I know this is kind of a hard curveball or, sweeper in the baseball sense to transition to athletics. But it is worthy to deconstruct and say, what cards are my kids playing? What card am I playing when we lose, we win, we this, we that? What do you think of Shakespearean poker?
Culturally, it's a massive one. Oh, it's huge. I think it's creating a lot of issues in culture in general, of being able to almost manipulate the view of you. And I think that's how I would describe it. You're manipulating the view of you to gain sympathy, to gain attention, in order to get some sort of mental chemical release, right? When I asked you before we got on if there's any science behind that, and we weren't sure. There might be studies out there. I'd be really, really curious, if there's been studies done on what kind of endorphins or chemicals that releases in the human brain when we play the victim through complaining, or however we might be doing that. How do we connect it to athletics? I would say in my athletic career, I certainly have done it. I can think of a handful of examples of, you almost get the sense that kids are making things up in terms of adversity, in terms of challenges, to make their failure or lack of performance seem more sensical, more common, more understood, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding that headspace, I think, becomes really important in how to talk them out of that headspace or help them out of that headspace. Or even just not paying attention to that, like understanding where that messaging is coming from and essentially ignoring it. No, we're not buying that kind of a deal. So that's how I see it happen in athletics a lot. Have I done it as a coach? This is the challenging question to me, right? Have I gone there as a coach? I would like to think no. I'd like to think my messaging would be acknowledging maybe the challenges that we did face. Like, oh yeah, we were we didn't have any subs that game. Okay, is that a truth that made the challenge in front of you harder? Yes. Is it okay to acknowledge that? I think yes. Does that become an excuse where we walk away and don't feel the bitter disappointment of defeat because we lean on that? I think that's where we start to say, yeah, I don't know that we like that kind of mindset, because that can transition into life in maybe not the best ways.
Yeah, and I think it's I know I went in order of how this was presented in the book. Let me give you an example. We're the young team, right? I mean, if you're in small town USA, or not necessarily the biggest school, you have cycles of classes that have kids who have played a while, and you have your teams that are older, juniors, seniors, and you've grown them into the team that they're going to be, right? And then some years you just have some younger players, they're inexperienced, and especially I'm going to speak for me in my group. A 9th grade, 10th grade guy is not the same as an 11th and 12th grade guy. Physically, mentally, emotionally, all the things. We take a bit to mature in a lot of ways. So if you have an older team at that juncture, I'm just using high school as an example, that's there. But if you say it, and again, how you say it matters. Oh, we're a young team. When you say that, how you say it matters, that is a statement of fact. You're young. Facts right there.
Mm-hmm.
You can't deny that. But when you say that after a game, because you didn't beat a team that was older than you, frankly, wasn't better than you, are you doing it for sympathy? Or are you doing it for the approval of the people around you? Like, well, that, we didn't get that one because. So I think when you lay that card on the table, you have to, shine a light on it. Like, am I trying to get either of these two things? And if you are, well, then you need to stop playing that card and just change the way you say it. And or say, no, we aren't doing that. Like, this is what it is. And I think that's where we're at in that unconscious incompetence stage, is you aren't even aware that you're playing that card. So first is, what card are you playing? Secondly, are you shooting for these two things? And that's regardless of, why people complain here in a little bit. I agree with you though. Yeah.
In that example, I think there's an ultimate irony there of when a young team says it for the excuse factor or sympathy factor, it actually it prevents them then from fully learning from their mistakes in being a young team, because they're not looking at their mistakes necessarily. They're looking at the excuse to fall back on so they don't have to look at their mistakes. So it's almost an ultimate irony of, yeah, we're young, which means we have a lot of room to grow. But in saying that, you're not truly looking at the mistakes because, well, I'm young. I'm supposed to make the mistakes.
Well, and I haven't been through, I'll acknowledge, I haven't been through this enough, just in observation. A lot of teams and even coaches and programs, if they do play that card, let's just use the young card as our going example here, it is very hard to shed. Like, you have to unshed that label at some point. So now it's a year later. Are you still young? Then it's a year later. Okay, what excuse do you have now? What card are you playing now? Because you're not young anymore. You have 5 seniors starting, 2 juniors, and 1 sophomore. Okay, what is it now? Well, and then you're kind of grasping for something else, right? And then you just play a different card because it's factually not true that you're not young anymore. So that is something that I think we really need to examine is what cards are we playing, what roles. It doesn't have to be necessarily the victim card, although that one is pervasive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, move on to the next part that I want to grab in part 1, and really more touch on this because I think it's a great practical way to try and get complaining out of your life. But is heed the 15th?
So this one, what was it? Beware the Ides of March. Darn Shakespearean plays. I can't get Shakespeare out. I don't know I haven't listened or read to Shakespeare, but it just seemed to come out in this. All right, the 15th. So there's a lot of great anecdotes in this book, stories that we're not going to cover. I even thought about first, second, and third world problems. I just didn't want to go there. This is one of those examples of not a first world problem. Like you think you have problems, this is a real problem. So here's the example. There was in 99, a good friend of Will Bowen's named Hal was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Yeah. You can pick whatever card you want at that point. But he didn't. He went out for a walk. He could barely go out. And, he made a joke about some large buzzards. And he's like, oh, now that's a bad sign. But when he at last caught his breath as they took this, walk outside, a guy that can keep his sense of humor, Will asked him, how do you manage to not complain with all you're going through? What a money question, right? Hal leaned on his cane and smiled and said, easy. Today isn't the 15th. Feeling he'd adequately answered my question, he turned and began to shuffle slowly back to the house. Will's like, what the heck does today not being the 15th have to do with anything? Hal stopped and smiled. When I was diagnosed, I knew it was going to be tough and that I could go through it cursing God, science, and everyone else. Or I could focus on the good things in my life. So I decided, there's a good verb that we need to remember, to
Mm-hmm.
give myself one unhappy day each month to complain. I randomly picked the 15th. Whenever anything happens that I might want to complain about, I tell myself that I have to wait until the 15th. Does that work? Will asked. Pretty well, he said. But don't you really get down on the 15th of each month? I asked. Will asked. Not really, he replied. By the time the 15th gets here, I've usually forgotten what I was going to complain about.
I love it. I love it. It's such a great story. It's such a great idea of one person coming up with that, and how easily spread I feel like that is. Like if I heard someone say that to me, like, oh, this is genius. I want to do. I mean, that's what I feel right now. It's like, oh, that's genius. I want to do that. I want to figure out how to implement that in my life. I love it.
I got one of my kids. They made one of those like handmade calendars and wrote in some of the holidays. You know, it was pretty cool. But I just want to go take like a red Sharpie and just circle the 15th across all those months. I know we're past one. The one that is also applicable, which was in the story, one of the like stories they just kind of inserted from people who wrote in about the no complaint challenge, was No Moan Mondays. And there's even a at the end of the book there, or I'll have to find it, but it was like, this is a no complain zone, and then like you can put it up. It was really funny. So the 15th, No Moan Monday, just having a day and saying, I don't know, whatever, if it's some sort of mental trick that we can play on ourselves. It's like, yeah, we'll complain on that day. And that violates another policy, you know, at the end of the book. But I find that it even if you got to that day, you would never use it. So
it's amazing how pervasive complaining can be just in basic things like, oh, it's Monday, I got a 5-day work week. And like there's just all these things that are built into our culture then to start complaining on Mondays, and then like Friday's the greatest thing ever. Which Friday is just 2 days away from Sunday, where you're complaining again that you're going to have to go back to work. It's just a never-ending cycle. So I do kind of like the day of the week thing to decide, yeah, we're not going to do this anymore. This is just a repetitive nonsense kind of deal. Okay, awesome. I just want to touch on that because I thought it was a great practical way to stop complaining. And it's so true. It's so simple, but it's so stinking true. Okay, moving to part B, in conscious incompetence. Let's go self-control math. The theorem of no triangulation.
Now, I'll admit I'm a little bit rusty on the drama triangle, but I will do the book justice and talk about triangulation. In the middle of the book, we talk about this idea of triangulation. You just literally imagine a triangle, right? An interpersonal, I guess you'd have 3 people in this case, but talking to someone other than the person with whom you have a problem is triangulation. So Jake and I have the problem, let's just say, but I'm going to go talk to my spouse about it, or my buddy, or whoever else, right? Now we have 3 people involved, possibly 4 or 5. Triangulation occurs when you experience a challenge with someone, but discuss the situation with someone else. Healthy communication is speaking directly and only to the person with whom you have the issue. You may have experienced this in your own life. This is the one for coaches and just parents in general. Hit me. I underlined the heck out of this. One of your children may be upset with a sibling, but come to you instead. You, the wise parent, use sarcasm, get involved by either advising that discontented child what to do, or worse, talking to the other child yourself. In the short term, you may resolve the current situation, but you are not providing your children, your athletes, your team with the tools they need to resolve future issues. You are allowing the complaining child to remain a victim in this situation, or establishing a pattern of triangulation for future challenges. I want to read this anecdote because it made Jake laugh and it made me laugh. This is the solution. This is what it looks like. Triangulation is rampant also in many churches. I would say just swap churches for teams, programs. Doesn't matter. I recently heard of one minister talking to another about the way a third minister was leading the church. And I imagine like one coach talking to another coach about the way the head coach does this. After several minutes of listening to the first minister's criticisms, the listener, who had remained silent up until that point, pressed the speaker button on his phone and called the minister being vilified. This is so savage. It's beautiful. I can't wait to read it. When the third minister answered the phone, the second minister said, "Ed, this is Jerry. I've got you on speakerphone and I'm sitting here with Mike. Mike was just sharing some feelings he has about how you lead your church. I don't want to be a partner to Triangulation, and I know you'd value the feedback he's so willing to share. So, Ed, here's Mike. Reverend Mike sat in stunned silence, his face blazing. Finally, he mumbled a few comments and reached past Jerry to disconnect the call. Then he stood and walked swiftly out of Jerry's office. In that moment, Reverend Mike clearly got the message that Triangulation is out of integrity, and Jerry drew a healthy boundary. And I wrote, boundaries are integrity issues. So no triangles, aka self-control math, the theorem of no triangulation. Break it down for me, Jake.
The kid one is so good, man. How many times does that happen a day? Oh, so and so's on my nerves. So and so's doing this. Well, have you asked him to stop? Yeah, I did. Well, have you tried not screaming at it? Right? Like, part of it is just getting them to understand how to communicate to one another.
Yep.
And that, I think, let me start out with this way. I think there is a place for a third party to be involved, but it's solely for mediation, and you have to understand that. It's because we've gone to each other, we can't find a resolution, or our conversations quickly devolve into frustration, anger, whatever. And we need you to be there to bring us back to level set whenever it escalates. Totally fine there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's all about going to the source of your problem, and it runs rampant in society and culture today, at least our American culture, right? From corporations to soccer teams to, I'm sure softball teams have them too, right? So and so did. Well, did you talk to the person, right? Go to the source of your problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a miracle worker. You want me to convey your feelings to another person. Number one, that's a huge responsibility. And two, you're running a massive risk that I misrepresent something that you've said here. Okay. With you really not having any correction ability until I come back to you from the other person's perspective. Like, I don't want to be involved in that. That's a massive risk to me. It's a massive risk to you. And it's going to slow down the process of healing and restoration for whatever we're trying to deal with here.
Jake, correct me. What is this fear of speaking again? Glossophobia. The strong fear of public speaking. What is the fear of confrontation? I gotta look this up real quick. Conflict phobia. That's not nearly as cool sounding. All right. So
No, not nearly.
I gotta say, people do have a fear of speaking, but the fear of interacting when there's tension has to be higher. I mean, I understand, maybe it's people generally relate to, but if we're all being honest, confronting or having a candid, can I speak candidly? I think we're more afraid of that. Maybe it's a tribal thing where we don't want to be, dejected. It depends on the power dynamic, right? Is somebody in charge, somebody not in charge, things like that. In the drama triangle, is in the 60s, Stephen Cartman. I'm just have it up here. There's a hero, there's a villain, there's a victim, and then there's somebody, we like to save. I'm going to save Jake, from this dastardly situation. And that's what parents do, right? I'm going to stick up for my kid no matter what. They're wrong. That's the villain. Let's take him down. We have all these Disney movies to help us with that. So I do think it's, or even being, because they're never as bad as you think they're going to be. Most people are pretty reasonable, especially the people who are willing to sit down with you. I just am struggling, to be honest, to grasp a program or a culture that doesn't have triangulation, in all of its facets, player to player, coach to player, parent to coach, parent to their kids, all the above. This is the tool we need to talk about. I mean, just in general. And I get that it's simplistic but being the guy that gets on the phone and says, I'm not going to be a partner in this, and that's jarring. I mean, I know it's funny when I read it. To execute on that is game changing. You probably only have to do it once.
Yeah.
Maybe twice.
Yeah. And it's not that there isn't a risk in that, right? That might ruin the relationship or trust or confidence, at least in the short term, of the person that you're doing it to. But even just simply looking at hey, I appreciate everything that you're saying, but you need to go talk to this person about it, because that's who the issue is. It's different. Maybe they might be coming to you saying, hey, I'm just looking for some advice here. I am going to approach Tom, but I'm just looking on looking for some advice on, how to articulate my words or my feelings. Can you help me? That's a
Yeah.
whole different ballgame, I would say, right? That's looking for guidance. The plan is still to go to the source of the problem, but I would say that this will be the biggest cancer, the quickest spreading cancer for any team. Two parents, starts out as two parents calling each other and complaining about the coach, about the team, about one of the other players. That will spread so quickly. And that it's just the high goes and it's just a wildfire, right? That's why even if I don't give a response that parents like, whenever they bring something to me, as much as I hate those conversations because I am a people pleaser, like through and through, I want to make everyone happy. And so those uncomfortable conversations or those hard truths that I might have to share with somebody are very difficult for me to do. But when they bring those problems to me or those issues, the first thing I was just thank you. Thank you for bringing this to me and not going to somebody else. The amount of times I've had parents who I'll find out after the season that like they hated X, Y, and Z or really had a problem with, this particular thing and be like, well, so you must not have cared that much because you never gave me a chance to rectify the situation. You knew that I was the problem or you perceived me as the problem, but then you never told me or went to me because you must not have cared for the problem to be fixed, or you were just really buzzing on the high you got of feeling that you were, I would almost say, on the moral high ground or felt like you were the speaker of justice. So that made you feel good. And that would be one thing that has always driven me nuts. As much as I hate those conversations, I hate it even more when I find out about them later or I find out about them from a third party. I'm like, well, you didn't give me a chance. You're upset at me, right? I'm here to coach your children and help them grow, and you noticed an area of something that could be improved, and then you never said it. Well, you didn't give me a chance, and so that's always been probably the most frustrating thing about coaching for me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to check myself as I read this. Would you think a coach that, let's just say a coach removed triangulation, no triangles. We're playing self-control math. We're going straight A from point A to point B. Would that just, and you can complain. Like, I don't want to be so self-conscious of our words. Like, am I complaining while I'm talking about complaining? That's funny. Could a coach last? Like, let's just say you are in a program, you're leading it, removing triangulation. I don't think you'd be very popular. I mean, we think about it. It's for the greater good. I don't think it would land well. I mean, maybe that's just me. Tell me what you think of that, because I feel this, right? I mean, I would love to, do that dial call. I'm not going to be a partner in this. You two go work it out. I'm going to sit here while you two talk this out. What's your issue? That is so foreign today that I don't think the coach would be welcome back, because that would stir the pot too much. We would rather just complain about each other and maintain the status quo versus creating healthy communication, because it is that foreign or that rare of a trait. What do you think of that? I don't know how long it would last.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. Actually, I think we might cut it short there, because I think we'll get back around to this when we get to the venting situation, because I do want to bring that up. I thought that was very intriguing when we mentioned it beforehand. So I think this is going to come full circle on that one.
Okay.
Ultimately. So let's go to another section here. The 5 reasons why we complain.
Okay.
Gripe.
Let's go one by one and we can go as far as we want. So GRIPE is the acronym. This was probably if Will was on podcasts, I didn't listen. I don't usually listen to the podcasts that the authors cover. I don't want to have any bias towards a certain concept versus another. But this is one I'm sure that people interviewing him talked about a lot. So GRIPE is the 5 reasons why people complain. And it is an acronym that I'm going to describe in a moment. And we'll go one by one, Jank. We don't have to spend a lot of time on each one. Will does a great job of highlighting this research from Dr. Robin Kowalski. He's mentioned quite a few times, done several studies on this at Clemson University at the time of this writing. The 5 main reasons, and then they give examples of each and what this type of complaining is really saying. So like there's what it is and then what it's really saying, and then they have a technique to go with each. So we'll go through that. So let's just, what is it? Okay. Number 1, great. G, get attention. Kind of goes with the approval, sympathy, but you're getting somebody's attention. And I want to, and we'll get into this one. I just wanted to make a placeholder in my mind. Kids who have not gotten attention from adults are going to complain. If they don't have healthy, I've been noticed, I've been cared, I've been loved for, they don't have that initial level of hierarchy or the needs of self-actualization, that's going to be an issue, a big issue. Number 2, R is remove responsibility. Heaven forbid we take control and ownership of our choices. Number 3 is inspiring envy. So I'm going to complain so that I get a little bit more than I should. Number 4 is just power. You are going to cut, criticize, take somebody down to lower them because I feel low. And then that'll allow us to either be equal or I will be above you. So it's a passive cheap shot is what I would call it to gain power. 5 is, this is one you already mentioned, excusing poor performance. All sorts of reasons. Let's go one by one. Jake, get attention. Human beings have an innate need to be acknowledged by other people, to feel safe, secure, and cared for. What this type of complainer is really saying is, hey, Jake, notice me. I want to talk to you. I want to get your attention. I'm completely lost as to what to say other than gripe about something. Here's a great technique to get the conversation off on a positive note. This one I just laughed at reading. Ask the person, hey, so what's going well with you, your family, your work, your hobby? Yes, if they start to complain, smile and just redirect them and say, yes, but what is going well with? Or yes, but what do you like about? Or yes, but what would you ideally like to see this working out? Or how would you ideally like to see this working out? So the first one is getting attention.
I had a thought on that, and it escaped me. Getting attention. I think this is largely why my kids will complain. This and the second reason, for sure. Here it is. As leaders, it makes it all that more important than if you don't want complaining in your space, whether it's the team, obviously the audience we're talking to, the team that we're leading. Putting forth praise for when things go well is unbelievably important, because in the absence of that, complaining happens, right? Mm-hmm. Right? They're getting attention, so give them attention, but give it to them in a positive way. Otherwise, the negative attention is going to creep in and take over, right? Even in little things. So when you're coaching, find the little things. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in front of the entire group, right? It doesn't have to be a group praise. But they come off the field and say, hey, I really like how you did this out there. Just one thing. It's a 3-second interaction. Doesn't need to be explained anymore. But they're going to feel seen, feel heard, feel appreciated. And it's filling that void of attention so that negative attention can't come in.
Yep. And that's something to learning to be present, learning to be others focused. If you had a bank account, I know that's an analogy, it's overused probably, but how much have you filled their bucket? I mean, if you were literally to start counting, you should almost be rolling out hundreds, in coins, just letting it fly. I mean, not in a, empty praise kind of way, because you should be specific as you were describing. Your kids should never have to fight for your attention, like your team.
Mm-hmm.
And so it almost speaks back to when we were talking about enthusiasm and the power of fun, and Catherine Price was going on and on about how, or even I guess Michael Easter with the comfort crisis, we need to train our attention and not be just so distracted through our devices and other things. Even I guess when we were in the friendship and the cooperation about relationships, to be able to look across to the person from you and give them your full attention. Mm-hmm. And that matters here, because if you don't, what are you going to get? And I've seen all sorts of kids do all sorts of things trying to get their coach's attention and approval in order to get playing time or get something else. So don't win the battle by not fighting it.
Yeah.
Give them the attention.
Absolutely.
You ready for number 2?
Let's go.
Remove responsibility. This complainer says, "What do you want from me? It's impossible. You can't fight this fight City Hall. It's marketing's fault. The ref's fault. The dog ate my homework. She was supposed to wake me up. The traffic was terrible. I didn't have my, caramel macchiato, something from Starbucks before this game. Whatever." This person is saying there's no use, so I'm not going to try. These complainers seek to blame other people and circumstances to justify what? Their lack of effort. And there's a quote here from Michael Brown in his book, The Presence Process. Blame, they said, equals to be lame. And Tony Robbins, they had a solution here, said, when a person says it can't be done, your response should be, if it was possible, how might you do it? And then the phrase that Bowen really liked to say is if somebody says, yes, but, simply say, I have faith in your ability to figure out a way to accomplish this. I have faith that you can do it. And I wrote down, when's the last time you heard this lately? Not just you as a person, but like, when's the last time a student or an athlete or a coach, like even the coaches, like head coaches, like, hey, I believe in you. That's nothing to say and everything at the same time. So the second one is remove responsibility and justify their own lack of effort by blaming other people.
Yeah, I think this might be the easiest one to pick out and see. I might say this is the most prevalent one. This is the one my kids cling to like nobody's business. The probably the most common thing is, hey, I need you to go pick this up. What is the first response always? I didn't do it. I didn't put it there. Right? So they're complaining about having to pick something up, and their method of complaining is to blame it on someone else, right? If I do, now I can complain because I'm pushing the blame on someone. I don't care. I didn't ask you who did it. I'm asking you to pick it up, right? So that's definitely the most common one that I deal with. Athletics, I see it fairly often, right? Especially, I think I said this a couple weeks ago. Soccer is notorious, right? Looking at someone else and complaining, like, what? They won't. No, take some. What could you have done better? It's just it stunts growth, and I think that's why, as a coach, this one drives me probably the most nuts because it's fully on the person. It's like getting attention. I could argue that some of that comes from people around you not giving the attention that you need. Right? Yeah. So it's a little bit
need,
right? This one is truly like complete decision, and it's so overt a lot of the time. And it just drives me nuts because in you deflecting, you're inhibiting your ability to learn from what just happened. It makes me want to pull my hair.
It was one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes. I remember it was the first one with Robert Downey Jr. for the record and Jude Law. He's like, it's so overt, it's covert. Oh man. Anyways, let's go to the third one. Inspiring envy. Or jealousy. And what this really is to brag. It's just hit it. So let me read the sentence for you because it's so funny. 3 of them. My boss is so stupid is a backhanded way of saying I am smarter than my boss, and if I was in charge, things would be better. My husband is a slob is the complainer bragging that she is neat. She drives like a maniac translates to I am safe and a courteous driver. That teammate is trash, meaning I'm not trash. You can imagine the things that people say. What are they trying to say? People complaining to inspire envy are actually trying to get you to appreciate them. This one is almost as savage as the triangulation one, Jake. Check this out. They feel empty and attack someone else as a means of making themselves look better. I have not coached girls and guys sports long enough to really contrast this, so I'm not going to archetype this. I think it's pervasive in both. But I'm going to say the next word and define it. Gossip is complaining to inspire envy. When you gossip, you should switch your bracelet. Gossip is speaking negatively about someone who is not present. Triangulation. Talk, number one, here's how you do this. Talk only about the positive traits of those who are absent. Say the same things with the same inflection that you would say if the person was literally in the room. Later, it says, when someone begins to complain about a negative attribute that person perceives another person to possess, like a compliment, you need to compliment the complainer on having the opposite trait. So, like, you flip it. So he gets angry at the least little thing. You would say, one of the things I admire about you is your ability to stay calm in difficult situations. So I know Carnegie had something very similar in How to Win Friends and Influence People way back in our friendships series. But that was a really interesting way to invert that and really working it. But the inspiring envy, I mean, you can see it, like you're saying, and it's kind of the power dynamic too. You're cutting somebody else down and implying that I have the ability. Like, if I was in there, I would do this. But instead they're saying, well, he's too slow. You know, he can't shuffle. He's not fast enough. Well, it implies you are. So
yeah. And I think there's always a subconscious thing. Well, not always. There often is a subconscious thing, at least in my head. I know when I do this, I'll preface what I'm going to say. So what I'll say is, look, I know I'm no unbelievable genius here, but my boss is an idiot. That is how I will deliver it. Well, I'm just subconsciously, like, I'm aware of what it's almost I'm subconsciously aware of what I'm doing.
Yep.
And I'm trying to put the words out there to not make it look that way.
Yeah.
But the action is irrefutable. The words that I have said are irrefutable. No, I do think I'm smarter than you. Essentially is what I'm saying. So it's a very interesting one. It's one that I catch myself doing all the time, and I'm just laughing to myself because subconsciously I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm trying to hedge against what I'm doing.
Yeah. And in this stage, as we're looking at, we're at just the conscious incompetence. You're aware of it now, and you're able to stop yourself more or less. Or sometimes you can't stop yourself. Like, I can't lie. Number 4, I can't complain. Can't not complain. Power is number 4. Complaints are often the currency which one purchases power. So authority, privilege, ease, solve on a bruised and hurting ego. When something happens, you can 1, let it pass, 2, work it out, or 3, go to war. A lot of people go to war. Complaining is often recruiting soldiers to fight on your side. The person complaining for power is saying, if it ever comes down to me versus him, here are the reasons. Let me tell you, fellow soldiers, why we should be on our side. We shall move to victory. Victory. That's more or less it. The best thing you can do is invite the person to go to and speak directly to the person being complained about. What I have, the person will probably say, and it doesn't do any good. Well, then it sounds like the two of you have a lot more to talk about. There are power dynamics.
Yeah.
And there are standoffs. And that is a normal part. If you've ever read Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, like, hierarchies are biological. You cannot fight them. They're genetic. They happen. There is going to be an alpha. It's just that when that hierarchy shakes out, we can't complain about it.
Yep.
Right? I mean, you're going to have a player or two that are the best, and you cannot be having the people who are 3, 4, and 5. Maybe we need to have them trip over the truth and be like, hey, right now, this is the thing we need to do to succeed as a team. I mean, that we talked about that in Group Genius and Group Flow as well. It's like everybody needs to play their role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we complain about our role because either we didn't choose it, or we don't like it, or that one looks cooler, or they don't deserve it, so on and so forth. But there is that power dynamic, and that wreaks havoc on, like, it because then you don't have the buy-in, right? I mean, what we're really saying is when we're complaining about power struggles, whatever they may be, it removes buy-in, and buy-in is essential in order to get the performance out of a group. And that was a long rambling vent about, yes, power is an issue.
No, yeah, I love it. The thing that stuck out to me, I think, about what you said is recruiting people to your side. Mm-hmm. And that's just, we have a subconscious level of tribalism just built into our human nature. We want people with us. Mm-hmm. Even within teams, we want smaller subset of teams that we feel like are on our side, that have our backing, that we want to know that people view things the same way we do. Yeah, it's human nature. So that call out is for me the biggest one, because I think that's a large motivation of why I would complain in this type of situation. From this type of motivation is try to get people on my side, right? I want those people. I mean, look, kind of going into all of this, when you complain to get sympathy, you don't necessarily want to do it by yourself. You want people there with you too, right? It's just like we don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be the only one who's miserable over here. Hey, you guys come be miserable with me. Look at us. Kind of a deal. So that for me was a good call out. That motivates me, I think, without even knowing it.
It'd be fun to laugh. I mean, and I shouldn't use the word fun. It would be illuminating to observe the inner battles that are actually going on, like to put them on paper. Well, this group is fighting versus this group because of this. You know, we got let's just stick with Shakespeare. What were the two groups in Romeo and Juliet? Is the Capulets and the Montagues?
Great memory.
What kind of Capulets and Montagues you got on your team? That's an old book. Who knows? That's an old story. What does it have to teach us today? Good Lord. Yeah. Yes, I am positive that you have some faction of Capulets and Montagues on some issue on your team. Almost positive. All right, last one, just for time's sake, is excusing poor performance. And this one seemed like the lowest hanging fruit in a very specific context. So let me read some of these because they made me laugh. The sun was in my eyes. He bumped me just as I took the shot. I need a new grip on this stupid golf club. You didn't wake me up in time. That one's kind of another one. The goal in this is to excuse poor performance and to rationalize it away by saying the circumstances were stacked against you, as if circumstances were some, personified thing. It's not my fault is the underlying message of such a complainer. And it goes on to describe George Foreman and so forth. This is the way to fix that. So Foreman didn't excuse his poor performance. So when someone complains to excuse poor performance, ask what he or she plans to do differently next time. This is one tool that you should just stare at the end of every game. Like before you go talk to your team, even yourself, it's like, okay, what are we going to do next time? Doesn't matter the result. Could be great. Could be you played your best game ever. Okay, what are we going to do next time? But in terms of a complaint thing, excusing performance in general, like I don't even think losing is this. This is something I want to highlight from Wooden. Did you have peace of mind that you did your best? Okay, regardless of the scoreboard. Are you excusing that because we talked about this before. You can play a team and you crush them, but you did not play your best that day. And so you'll excuse it away versus like, okay, we played our best, but we lost. But okay, now we don't have to excuse anything. So here's some examples. The sun was in my eyes. What you would say to that is, what can you do next time to be prepared in case the sun is in your eyes again? It moves all from the problem to the solution. Solutions focused coaching 101. The air was dry. My throat was sore, and so I couldn't sing as well as I would have liked. Well, sometimes you'll be singing where the air is dry. What can you be ready? You didn't wake me up. Well, sometimes I might forget. What can you do to make sure you get out of bed on your own if I don't remember? Well, the last one is he didn't have the part ready, so I couldn't get my work done. Well, if that happens again, what can you do to make sure the task gets completed anyway, or at least make certain that those who need to know will be informed ahead of time? So if you have somebody who's excusing and rationalizing away, your goal is to go to the solution of what could we do next time. Don't even linger on the result or the outcome. Just go immediately. How can we fix this? And I know some people want to well, I don't want you to give me a solution. I just want you to listen. Yeah, no, I'm not going to listen. Like that's for psychological safety and complaining. I know that listening is, and I hear you, and active listening is a thing. Okay, I heard you. Okay, what are you going to do next time? And that's probably my own weakness as a coach or as a person. I just immediately want to go straight to the what are you going to do about it? Yeah, and maybe that's a little bit harsh, but whatever.
Well, yeah, there's kind of the whole approaching the whole world that way, and then there's approaching your wife that way. Which is where it gets tricky, my friend. No, I agree with everything that you said. I think it connects with responsibility really, really closely. And I guess to sum up kind of everything you said, I would say that a great antidote for complaining, or a great preventative measure for complaining, is called preparation. When you are prepared, you have far less things to complain about. So prepare, prepare, prepare.
Failure to prepare is preparing to fail.
Bingo.
Dang it, Wooden. It's like we're studying your pyramid or something. All right. Give me another topic. That was gripe. I would really love to see the inverse of gripe, like from a culture perspective, like just to completely inverse it, not even mention the gripe, and say, what would the positive version of this? Like like action verbs. We blank, we this, we that. Like that'd be cool. I'm going to have to ponder that. All right. Sorry. Next topic.
Okay, let's move to part 3, unconscious competence. For time's sake, let's just touch on one here. I'm going to go, because this is near and dear to my heart, being a sarcastic human being. No criticism and no sarcasm.
I knew it. I knew it. Oh, man. Okay, so we had a little bit of a disagreement and maybe a nuance. So Bowen says in the book that it's not what you say necessarily, it's how you say it. So one section we're skipping is these 4 phrases like, of course, and this always happens to me. And those words in and of themselves are neutral. And you can say them in a positive manner. So I want to, maybe we're wrong. I'm okay with being wrong about this. But according to Bowen, to get to your point, no criticism and no complaints. If you criticize or use sarcasm, you're supposed to switch your bracelet. Now, I 100% agree with the criticism part. Now, I want to define this so we're all on the same page. Criticism is defined as pointing out another's fault in a disapproving way. Therefore, constructive criticism, I love that, air quotes, is an oxymoron. To be constructive is to build up. To criticize is to tear down. I love that. I don't know why. It just made me happy because I think everybody says, give me critique and constructive criticism. And that makes me laugh now. Yep, criticism, he says is an attack. Jake, this sentence is for you. It blew my mind. Leadership can be a daunting task. The use of criticism is an indication of a leader who lacks the resources to truly lead. Boom. A leader's job is to inspire people to reach their highest level of performance. And then it gives an anecdote about a leader who learns how to herd cows because you have to be gentle. And like once they start going in the right direction, you're supposed to back off and let them go. So he was controlling and then he was not. Before you criticize people for their performance, give them a chance to correct themselves. Chances are they will. I would agree with that in terms of like a lot of athletes, myself included. I didn't need another critic. I was my own worst critic. Mm-hmm. One more critic was like a multiplier and it just threw me over the edge. So I think we're on the same page with criticism. Are we right?
Yeah. Yep. Nope. Absolutely.
I know it. You wanted sarcasm. So, okay, let's talk about this. Sarcasm is passive-aggressive complaining, according to Bowen. It's a negative comment with a humorous escape, meaning sarcasm is a sharp and often satirical or ironic utterance designed to cut or give pain. A cutting, often ironic remark intended to wound. And I told Jake before we recorded, the Latin root of sarcasm is sarco, which means tearing the flesh. And then it goes on to say that sarcasmos or sarcasian means ripping or tearing away the flesh. And these other words were forms of torture used in ancient medieval times. So Bowen says, well, people ask, what's wrong with a little sarcasm? Just being funny. Well, sarcasm is always a critical statement with a funny spin. And then he talks about people in Africa. They actually have no words for sarcasm. So when you say something, you either mean it positively or negatively. Like it does not compute. And they just can't, they don't register sarcasm. I think that's fascinating. So what I would say, having read the book and learning the principles beforehand, I would say that your intent still matters. If you are self-deprecating, like the direction and how you say it, if you're saying it towards someone to break them down, switch your bracelet. If you're saying it to cut yourself down a little bit, like tearing your own flesh for vulnerability and humor, so it's for like to build them up, it's like I'm going to be sarcastic to me. There is a difference. I think sarcasm is much more nuanced than Bowen's getting at. I get that it's easier to blanket, but it violates his other principle. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. Sure. So I do think that it can get out of control and nobody's really aware of how they use sarcasm. But yeah, hit me with sarcasm. How do you process this? I'm open to interpretation here.
I don't know. I could probably sit here and process this all day. Here's what I will tell people. If I'm joking about it, it very clearly means that like I don't care about it. Like I wouldn't joke about something that I truly care about or whatever. And so for me, is it giving a humorous out to a comment that I want to make? No. I think sometimes I will actually use it to give a humorous out for the person that I'm making a comment to or about
Mhm.
as truly a psychology measure.
Mhm.
Look, you've missed the goal from 3 yards away. Psychologically, that is. Am I supposed to have a serious conversation with that human being and say, you need to be better when you're 3 yards away from the goal to put the ball into the net? That is poor. Is that the conversation I'm supposed to have? Because that's not the conversation that that kid wants. Believe me, I've been there, right? Whereas if my coach says, no worries, next year they're actually doubling the size of the goal, so we'll be just fine for next year. Okay. In that statement, I'm trying to convey to them, like, hey, it's time to move on. I don't really care. Like, let's just make a joke of it and move on. Because that's what it is. It's a game. It's silly. Right? Now, I may make that comment and be like, hey, next time just keep your chest over the ball. You're fine. Right? But it's almost my way to give them a humorous out to process the
Yeah.
destruction that they're feeling inside. So that's where I would kind of go into the nuance of it. For me, it's pretty layered. There are situations where I will use it to be a jerk.
Yeah.
There's
Wow.
no doubt about it. I mean, it comes out that way. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't come out that way sometimes. But for me, sarcasm is a tool to inject humor in a situation where humor needs to be injected.
Okay. So we were just, I'll even say the word complaining or illuminating our audience, if we want to go back to that word, about the dictionary definitions of things. So I was asking, what is the positive version of sarcasm? Maybe we're using it as a synonym for something else.
Sure.
And according to the interwebs, when would wit be a good substitute for sarcasm? So I think wit and sarcasm are different according to this. The meanings of wit and sarcasm largely overlap. However, wit suggests the power to evoke what? Laughter by remarks showing verbal felicity or ingenuity and swift perception, especially of the incongruous. That's a whole sentence to unpack. But I think to give you credit, what you are probably doing, if we're going to parse words, is being witty for the benefit of the receiver. Being sarcastic to the detriment of the receiver is a no-go. So if
That's
we were,
fair.
it is, so if we, I agree with you. And for me, I respond really well to the wit. You're making me laugh at the absurdity of the situation. And one thing they have to remember, when we went back to loyalty and we were talking about character strengths, I'm doing a heck of a job referencing all of our stinking episodes today. Listeners, you're welcome. We were back studying the power of character strengths under loyalty, being true to yourself by acknowledging our signature strengths. Go check it out. But one of Jake's was perspective. Like he had the ability to see the bigger picture, and he's always had this. But the way he unravels that is he can come up with something witty in the moment, which is why he's very well received with large groups of people in his life, is that he can see the whole perspective. He can see the thing that just happened. He can smile and then deliver it so that it builds the other person up. And if you've been on the receiving end of this, you are not being torn to flesh in medieval times. I think if you watch what actually happens, you would notice that it is not tearing down. So that's called a compliment. You're welcome.
I appreciate that articulation. You're welcome. That was good, and I think it'll be good it's very good for me, and I think it'll be helpful for the audience too, because I definitely see the line there of sarcasm versus wit.
I just gotta say, you're witty, like very
Witty.
very witty. You're not sarcastic. You're witty. Is that the Replacements? What was the phrase that they used in that? It was the kicker. I'm losing it. I'll find it. I can only reference our past episodes to plug ourselves, Jake. I can never smell the movies. Dang it! You can tell where my head's at. Darn it! I'm not flawless. All right, new topic. New topic.
Right.
We're in the end game.
I appreciate we went there because that was certainly illuminating to me. All right, par 4, conscious competence. Let's go with the greatest gift of actually, you know what? Let's stop. Let's do the no vent policy first, and then let's end with the greatest gift of becoming complaint free. That seems like it would make better chronological sense.
Yeah. All right. This one may not have as done a few, but this talks about mastery. And in this section, you get good when you get, you're disgusted by being around complaining. It's just like, ugh. Like, I mean, it's like when you walk into a house and it stinks because somebody just dropped a bomb. You're like, yeah, this sucks. Here's the one that hit me really hard. You're like, was a donkey said that in Shrek? It's like, you cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me deep. Bowen, you cut me deep. Here we go. One of the greatest gifts. So, like, okay, guys, I hear what you're saying. We shouldn't complain. I'm not going to gripe. Haha, it's a good acronym. But here's the thing. One of the greatest gifts of becoming complaint-free person is the impact you will have on your family. Your children will tend not to only model your behavior, but to adopt your outlook on life. They will entrain with you and begin to see things as you see them. Children become like the adults they see. Do you really want your children to become habitual complainers? Do you want them to adopt a gloomy worldview and to feel like a disempowered victims? Will Bowen says that his dad, when he was a kid, would go in and do the dishes, and he would drape over his shoulder a dish towel, and he called it the left shoulder cooking towel. And to this day, Will Bowen, who knows how old he is, I didn't look it up. To this day, he has a left shoulder cooking towel. I never place the towel on my right shoulder, always my left, just like that. So the greatest gift of becoming complaint free, right there. Oh, I went out of order, dude. I'm sorry.
You did go out of order. That's
Son
okay.
Son of a gun. My bad. But yes, I was like, oh, that was a super serious moment. Oh shoot, I went in order of the one on my sheet. So for the record, in the book, we're out of order. So that was
we're out of order, and I knew we were going out of order. And then he threw the Shrek line in there. So then I was like, okay, we're vibing. And then he kept going. I'm like, whoa.
Sorry. I looked down at my sheet, and that was the first one I saw. My bad.
I'm like running through the vent thing, and I'm like, I'm waiting for it.
Yep.
Okay. Anyways, the no vent thing. Let's go back to the no vent thing. It's fine. It's fine. We'll go back to the no vent thing. Let's talk about it, and then we'll reassess that greatest gift.
Okay. Thank you for recovery. Recovery is more important than perfection, people. Way not to complain. I like this. Immediate action. All right. So the no vent policy, and I see where you're going now because I wrote my note. Shrek was wrong. Better out than in, he always said. So there is a myth that expressing anger is healthy, according to the book. It isn't. There's some research by Dr. Brad Bushman at the time he was at the Institute for Social Research, University of Michigan. He stated, our research clearly shows that venting angry feelings increases aggressive inclinations. It does not decrease them. Now, as a coach or a person before reading this, I would have said that venting is great. Get it out. Mm-hmm. Right. And then you just aren't, wallowing your anger inside, like boiling it up. The facts and findings do not show that venting one's anger has positive value. It harms the self and others. So what they did, and college students must be willing to do anything for a Taco Bell gift card.
I was.
Dude, but it's funny. So they had kids come in and they had them write an essay, and no matter what they wrote, they just wrote on the top, F, this is the worst essay I've ever read. And they assumed somebody, some other student graded them on this. But here was the interesting part. The students who were allowed to vent and hit this pillow were ostensibly released their anger, poured much more hot sauce into their cups. So this idea that they were given this score, they were allowed to react. You could punch a pillow or you were the control group and you did it. And then you were going to feed this, person hot sauce in a cup. And if you hit the pillow, you dump the whole bottle out. You're like, dude, you can have this. So what it did is it compounded. Now, that wasn't the worst one. I thought that was funny. Like, hey, dude, drink this TikTok hot sauce challenge. The popular catharsis or anger venting theory would have us believe that students who pounded the pillow should have released their anger, blown off their steam, and set free their demons and a dozen other pithy little cliches. But they held more anger and more resentment. Bushman stated The results of our study show that people who vent their anger are about twice as aggressive as those who do nothing at all. Now it got worse. So they gave these like little words with friends, fill in the blanks. I love devious researchers. This is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, people who hit the pillow, fill in these words. People who didn't hit the pillow, fill in these words. The pillow people produce these words: choke, attack, kill, and rape. The non-pillow people filled in the words this way: chose, attach, height, rope. Aggression leads or becomes more likely after venting. Participants read a pro-catharsis message claiming that aggression action is a good way to relax and reduce anger. Subsequently, expressed a greater desire to hit a punching bag. So, all that's to say is, before reading this, I probably would have had a venting policy. Like, I would have probably put up a heavy bag in the dugout, go whack the sucker, be angry, and then go back out, right? Get it out of your system. Now, having read this and having some serious studies to back it up, I don't think you should have a venting policy. I do think you should have some other, mental health, fitness, emotional, mental resilience strategies, but venting is not it. So how do you think about venting, Jake? Because this is not what I expected. Venting is more like complaining.
Are we giving them license to have less self-control when we allow the venting to happen? Do you think that's what's happening here? Like, okay, we're letting you get it out, so therefore you are becoming less disciplined in self-control of your feelings?
How is losing control going to help you get control kind of idea?
Yep, exactly. Is that what's being is that how our brains are interpreting what's happening? Of like, well, I'm letting this go, and it feels good. Maybe there's that release. Maybe there's some sort of chemical that's released, so it feels good. So then we're more apt to do it in higher and stronger ways. See what I'm saying?
It's an interesting one. I'd have to dig into it. Now, I'm a flow coach, so I work on helping people perform their best. So I'm not a psychologist. I have to really sit with this one.
Mm-hmm.
I agree that not venting, according to this, only just doubles down, makes it worse. So if it does make it worse, and they go into some distinctions in the book here, if you outburst, you should immediately be taken out of the game.
Yeah.
Because now you are out of control, and the results of that is really hard to come back.
Yep.
To baseline. So not that that's always an option, but maybe even just stating this research, and I'll have to figure out what other strategies there might be. But if you are on a team, not only do we not complain, but we do not vent in terms of we don't just show displays of outbursts. And I've been guilty of this. Like, it feels so good to chuck your glove, throw your bat, throw your this when you get angry, versus sit with the discomfort of, I just sucked. Maybe this is more of a Mark Manson thing, right? In The Subtle Art, where it's like, hey, disappointment panda, or some of the other concepts where it's like, hey, it's normal to screw up in sports. The world is not going to end. It'll be okay.
But there has to be some processing of that anger. Unless we're trying to get to the point where you're training yourself not to feel anger because it's a negative emotion, but that doesn't seem healthy either. So then how do we, in a healthy way, process the anger or frustration that we're feeling? Because it would seem to be saying that this is like, well, basically you just bury it, which there's science to say that actually has physical health effects.
Correct.
That are not good. So this would seem to be a hold to me of how on earth we're supposed to help people process anger if they can't vent it in some way. I think vent almost implies that it has to come out. Maybe there's a way to internally process it that's not necessarily venting, but turning it into a different emotion, or taking those feelings and moving them into a different segment of emotion. This one's puzzling to me because I'm on board. I would have said, yep, you should absolutely be able to vent. I would tell anybody that they could come to me and tell me whatever's on their mind, get it all out. etc., etc. But now we're talking science and saying, no, it's essentially encouraging them to lose control, which puts this in a whole different perspective for me.
Bowen says that this is a hotly controversial topic, and so he debates psychologists on this very thing. I realize that debating this notion is a hotly controversial thing for most people because the idea is so widely believed. But just as the fact that millions of people for thousands of years believing that the world was flat or whatever other reason did not change the shape of our planet, the number of people, regardless of their scholastic degrees, believing the theory of catharsis does not make it a viable approach to happier living. It is, according to Bushman, just the opposite. And then remember when I talked about processing in the beginning, definition? This is where that definition shows up. So it says sharing your feelings and complaining, or processing and complaining are not the same thing. So you're saying, I am mad when I strike out versus, F this effing game in a Crash Davis standpoint, like I'm done. I'm gonna have to do some learning. If anybody's got anything on this, let us know, because I would say that you're right, there needs to be something. Like, you cannot just say like bury. I don't think burying is the right thing. I also don't think lashing out is the right thing. So there's something in the middle.
Right. And I'm not sure what that should be. That's a very, very interesting topic. Yeah. If anyone has anything to share or offer us, I would love to read, hear, whatever on it.
And what is an outburst? Because, I think I was told by like a Ken Revisa or whoever worked, maybe it was Revisa who worked with Cal State Fullerton, like that. This is a genius product, like the little toilet that you can flush. You go hit the toilet and it flushes away the anger, the mistake. I've also heard people, at least in baseball, they take a baseball, like, so they step off the mound and then they squeeze their anger into the ball and then let go. Is that lashing out? I mean, like, isn't it the same thing as the pillow at that point?
Right.
This is like the nuance, I guess. I just don't know.
Right.
Like, how do you process messing up on your team?
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance, and I guess I keep going back to self-control. But you should have control. You should have control enough to feel the anger and not have to hit the pillow. But then where does that anger go? The only thing I can think of is either you train yourself to perspective, right? To not giving the F's, like you said. But at some point, something's going to come across your value system that's going to make you angry, and probably should make you angry. Right? I mean, moral injustices should make human beings angry. Like, I'd be concerned if it didn't. So then how do you process that? Or is anger truly designed to create violence? In which then you need to be very careful about the values that you set. This is going beyond the scope of probably our discussion.
We're out of our lane, Jake.
We've come across a few discussions today that have really made me want to sit and dwell on them for a while.
We're in Shakespeare. We're doing theorems. Geez, what am I setting us up for failure, for the record? Well, I mean, like, I guess I would have to look in. If you like, go ahead and be angry. You do well to be angry, but don't go to bed angry. Okay, it's okay to be okay. Just don't use that anger. And so, like, that redirection, because a lot of people say, like, emotions are neither negative or positive; they just are. Like, you get a lot of in that, and it's like, I would presume is anger a negative fuel source. But spite's a flow trigger. Like, I mean, you can prove somebody wrong, but eventually you got to let that go. I don't know. Again, I'm just belaboring the point at now. Yes, we're out of our depth. Please help us.
I think our main point here is maybe reassess how you view venting. If you're a coach, if you're a parent, just reassess it. I don't know if you should change it or not, but you should reassess it. Think about it. Sit with it. Dwell with it. I love it. Okay.
No, wait, I want to end with this. No, what we should do is take a hard stance, like Watashi, which was the lieutenant or whoever it was with Stephen Pressfield. He's like, Private, did the military issue you feelings? No, then you don't have any. Like, no, we're going to take a hard line. Watashi does not care about your feelings at all. Like, well, then no, we're going to bury it. You know what? We're just going to go old school and say, bury your feelings. Not really. Please don't sue us. We like what we do. Bury your feelings. You don't have any. They don't matter.
We didn't issue any here. Sorry. One of our policies is no feelings, so you're gonna have to lose them. Sorry. Thanks for you. Okay.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good.
Let's revisit this greatest gift real quick. Can you summarize that again for us?
Absolutely. So, the idea that the greatest gift that you can give becoming complaint free is with your family. And, that is this place that you go. And in this, you'll be able to be a good example for other people. It's in your locus of control. And that is your immediate circle that will be the first affected beside yourself and probably the most motivating. And so, convictingly, golly, I mean, it's like going to church doing these. I have to look at my kids and hear their self-talk, because all my kids can talk and they're very verbal creatures. Mine are. They're very openly verbal, not as introverted as some others. Some of the things they say, you're like, oh, I taught them that, and that. Oh, you're like, dang it. So, as I've pondered this and read it, and I'm not on the no complaint experiment. I think we'll have to add this one to a challenge at some point for people and in the athletic world, whether you're a coach or athlete or whoever. Primarily for the effects of, you can do it for your performance, you could do it for yourself, but because you love the people around you. And I wrote that as one of our notes that we didn't get to is that self-control is a love problem. You don't love the people enough around you. I'm gonna actually read that just sentence because it was just a sentence. It wasn't anything crazy, but it was towards the end of the book, and it said, "Love is unconditional acceptance and looking for the good, and love is really what we're not doing when we don't have self-control. Is we don't love the people around us enough to control ourselves." And that's a hard truth. It could be a hard truth, whether you agree with it or not. So, what do you think of that?
Well, as coaches, when we're teaching this and talking about this with our players and encouraging this with our players, that's the next generation's dads, moms, bosses, and so that's why it's so important, right? It's not so that they learn self-control on a field. It is so that they learn self-control in a home. It is so that they learn self-control in their workplace. That's what it's all about. That's where that's why we discuss these things, right? That's why we go into these things. Your greatest ministry, your greatest purpose is your family. It's the people that you're so connected to. And I'm with you. There's nothing cooler, but also nothing more that cuts straight to your soul than, like, I'm going to say in my case, my son, because I'm a father, right? My son will open his mouth and I come out. And it's like, my first reaction is like, oh, no, kind of a deal. Because you talk about that with sarcasm. My son definitely has that. And so it's just one of those things that it cuts you, man. And on the flip side of that, there'll be times where I will open my mouth and my dad will come out, and I was like, and it's this weird thing because it's so subconscious. Like, and I know exactly who that sounds like as soon as it comes out. But there was nothing that filtered through my mind or anything. It's like, oh, you're gonna sound like your dad now, or hey, your dad always used to say this, so here we go. It's just like it comes out, and I'm like, oh no, and that's not. I love my father. It's just so uncontrollable that it does cut you. It's pretty funny.
It's like that slow-mo of like a player reaching for a pass and they come up like an inch short. You're like, no, like it's gone, it falls. You're like, shoot, pass incomplete.
I mean, that's the thing. We talk about self-control, right? But sometimes just human nature, what you've observed, what you've been taught, what you have heard for the formative years of your life just comes out on autopilot. So it's really important that we have self-control and the things that we talked about, because when those moments do happen and autopilot kicks in, we want them to reflect the right things, right?
Correct. All right. Well, in summary, let's talk. Bowen says this. So I'm convinced, Jake, now that we've read I don't know how many books, a lot. Um, authors are absolutely required to use like this phrase. It's really funny. Because even the best authors do it. They use the phrase, if you get nothing else from this book, ding, 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 ding. All right. So what is that phrase? So what does Bowen say? If you get nothing else from this book, people, or this conversation, from Shakespeare to math to no venting, he says, our thoughts create our lives and our words indicate what we are thinking. In every moment, you are creating your life with the thoughts you give primary attention to. And goes into all the thoughts of, your thoughts become your words and your words become your destiny, that trope thing. But we covered a lot. I mean, I would recommend checking out the book. You don't necessarily need the book to understand taking the experiment. It does help to go through those stages. It makes a lot more sense, like knowing which stage you're at. So if you do go take the 21-day challenge, go support them, get the bracelet, get the book on Amazon, bookshop.org, wherever books are sold. Not a hard read at all. It's a simple concept, one that we all deal with. But yeah, we talked about Shakespearean poker, self-control math, taking a day or a Monday to not moan, the 5 reasons people complain, no sarcasm, wit is okay, but no sarcasm, no criticism, the no vent policy, and the greatest gift. We've covered already the discipline is destiny again. That was number 1 in the series. Number 2 is the subtle art. This was number 3, a complaint-free world. We're going to move on, foreshadowing, to chop wood, carry water. A little bit more process-oriented. I've been recommended that one over and over. Just I've never quite got to it, so I'm excited. And then we'll wrap the self-control series, 5 books of stupid, with discipline equals freedom. Good old Jocko. We get to Jocko. Lo and behold, good. How we're gonna have to, Jake. I'm gonna have to prime you for that episode to give you. We need an impersonation of Jocko when we get to number 5. I need a Jake version impersonation of Jocko. I don't know what you need to do to pull it out of your gut. Yeah, those inner, small intestines. But I need you to dig deep, buddy, because Jocko's on the horizon, and we need it. I mean, this is what the people want.
All right, I'll have to get on some YouTube shorts probably and just watch them on repeat. I've never really thought about doing a Jocko impression, so
the whole episode, Jake, you got to stay in character.
Okay.
Any final words, buddy?
No, man, there was a lot of stuff and things that we went through. Good stuff. A lot of things that I'm going to take out and dwell on, and it was good. A lot of things I brought out kind of to the front of my mind in terms of how I'm communicating and what I'm communicating. So I thought it was a lot of good stuff today. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. Thanks everybody for learning what lasts. Get some self-control, get some perspective, and stinking stop complaining.
Mm-hmm.
Be well. See ya.
Bye.